Could they erase all the shots? Was they collecting dots? Under the docks. Under the docks. Yeah, under the docks. Under the docks.
Welcome back to Under the Docks. Today, we're exploring the Weathermen 3, All for Floyd 2020 film directed and narrated by Patrick Mack. The reason we're covering this film is because it explores the death of George Floyd in a different perspective. Patrick Mack used to have a channel, In Pursuit of Truth, which is now banned. You're not going to find this on the internet. You're not going to find this on Google. You're going to have to go to Rumble and BitChute. And what he did with his series was he was talking about the Weather Underground. And the Weather Underground was a group of radical leftists that were trying to do some political change with kind of race baiting, so on and so forth. So he kind of connects this third one with the All for Floyd. So you can go back and watch 1 and 2, but they're totally different because this one specifically goes with the George Floyd incident, and they explore some interesting avenues of human trafficking, false flags, connections with politicians, so on and so forth. And a best way to sum this up would be it has an extensive body cam footage and police narratives that like maybe you wouldn't see on normal mainstream media.
Yeah, this one, it was really hard at first to even find. I wasn't even sure what this Weathermen 3 stuff was about. I just kind of ignored that part and just searched for the All for Floyd, which made it even harder for me to find this thing. And I did find some random link on Rumble or Odyssey. It was not the easiest thing to come across. And when I finally started watching it, just to be clear, I don't think you have to watch the first two because I didn't. I just went right to this one, and it felt standalone enough.
I think it's completely standalone. I think they kind of just were trying to make some broad claims, which you kind of see. We'll delve into it as we go through it. But plotting the course. The premise of this is that the media got it all wrong. That it wasn't about racism. It was about something deeper. Was it something personal? Was it something that maybe George seen? That the oddities that the cops had, the redactions in body cam footage, the lack of transparency, the George Floyd and Chauvin working together at a nightclub. Like, so they paint the scenario of all these connections of different businesses and entities and political figures that are all possibly in on this plot, but they kind of dance around what is the actual, meat and potatoes. They suggest stuff, but they don't have any evidence.
And not only do they not have evidence in some places, they'll just pull up a random internet search that I don't know if they did or if this was kind of harvesting a bunch of different internet forums and then just kind of plucking the most salacious sounding stuff. But they would just be like, hey, here's this lady that we were just talking about. Here's a funeral home that she owns. And here's an order for over 400 caskets. What does this mean? And then they would just kind of move along without actually making the specific claim.
And a little of this movie, In Pursuit of Truth, got a little QE because the guy is a big QAnon supporter. And you can tell because it's question. And like, it's cool to ask a lot of questions and they're relative, but sometimes it kind of gets you down to the path of like, okay, let me get some interviews or some hardcore facts, and you're left hanging a lot of the times. Now, some of the key claims I thought were important for me that like not just important, but actually resonated was the El Nuevo Rodeo nightclub. The Chauvin and Floyd both worked there. Now, they have conflicting information because they have the city councilwoman on a news report saying they worked there for 17 years. But the narrator does clear it up that Chauvin worked there for 17 years and Floyd worked there about a year or so. So we knew that there's a connection, and that's where they kind of harp on the, was it personal or did they have some kind of other business relationship together?
Then it leaves so many of these questions, and that one in particular, I noticed the rhetoric of this video where they would really emphasize over and over how Chauvin worked there for 17 years. You know, how could you not know every single person? And then Floyd worked there for almost a year. And I don't know exactly what the almost is. They're not specific enough to know if almost means 6 months and 1 day, or if it means 11 months and 29 days, right? But they kind of state the 17 years over and over. I don't know, man. I've worked at places for a long time and not known someone that was there working inside versus you being outside. Because the other thing that it clarified was that Chauvin's role at this nightclub was essentially to sit in his patrol car outside and then wait for someone to call him, or if he saw something popping off, to then go and kind of investigate or instigate, you could probably say better. And then Floyd kind of worked either the door or worked inside the club. So it wasn't like they were both, sharing a locker room and like dapping each other on the fist on the way in and out. They were still removed quite a bit.
Quite a bit from each other. And like you said, I've worked with people right now that I don't know everybody over there. Like I could see their face, but I don't have no idea their name or anything they do at my job. I just seen them. Oh yeah, that guy works with me.
And they leave a little insinuation that they might know each other from like the porn industry, although they don't outright say that. The rhetoric of the film kind of leads you into that angle, and then they just drop it, and then they walk and go into another angle.
Yeah, and when they're connecting all these businesses like the El Nuevo Rodeo nightclub, La Raza radio station, and the Odd Fellows and like the secret society. So these key claims that they make, they're not like, it was difficult to put key claims because they're claiming it, but they have nothing to back it up. It's like, well, yeah, there's a Masonic temple in that city. And you're like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like, cool, I get it. Like, but where's the connection? And like this guy could have, where they bring up Marissa from that, the owner of the El Nuevo Rodeo nightclub. They suggest that her mom may have known Barack Obama's mom because they went to school at the same time, like at Hawaii University, which is a huge college. Like that's like a lot of the vague claims. A lot of these claims are really hollow because I watched this film in 2020 when it first came out, and I was kind of mesmerized by it because I think I was just I was watching so many things at the time, and now rewatching it, the claims and knowing more, and I'm like, it's not as juicy as you expect, man. So the claims are also, they start claiming about DEI, right? It gets into this DEI segment of where like, hey, there's a huge Somalian immigration in Minneapolis, and there's been this problem with police, but it doesn't really connect for me to the story of what's going on. Like I get where they're loosely going with it, but it's like they jump around because it's like, is the cops bad? But then it's this DUI hire that shot this woman, this Australian, and they go on a rant about that. And it's like a key claim for them, but it doesn't really address much of the actual George Floyd incident.
Yeah, and I'll get into like some of the pros and cons in a second. I made my own real short list of the key claims that I came across. There's so many. So, for example, that George Floyd, and a lot of these claims are just things that I had already heard before, but they're kind of consolidated. That George Floyd had broken into an apartment and held a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach, demanding like money and jewels. That the toxicology report had fentanyl, meth, and morphine. That one of the claims is that he went to Yates High School. He says, but that there's no record of him there. ... Which I don't. It's not a claim outright, but it's an insinuation. Another one was, for someone that's affected so many lives, where are there so few people that actually know him that came out and talked about him? Another one is that Ben Crump was after getting the UN to stop militarizing police, so that there was this overarching sort of political motive behind all this that went way beyond any sort of local politics. The one that you mentioned, that George Floyd and Chauvin knew each other and worked together in various capacities. that Lana Santa Maria, the lady that owned, or the mother of the lady that owned the club, again went to this Hawaii U, and just because she went there at the same time, she might have known, Barack Obama's family. Dot dot dot. Also, that one of Santa Marina was selling something to Sabri, and this person Sabri was known as the Muslim kingmaker. So now there's some kind of a connection that if you get high up enough in the local politics of this area, then you can just like run the country. I don't know. Dot dot. There's another dot 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 there. There's a whole bunch of different Muslim and Hamas specific clips and people talking. So they start tying this link between George Floyd got co-opted by Muslims, or by Hamas more specifically, or Hezbollah. They kind of go through a few different names, and that the entire BLM movement was co-opted by Middle Eastern politics, used to just foment more chaos in the United States. That, if anything, I can say is like the main claim. That was like the number one claim. And then there was a few other really minor ones about human trafficking, which it didn't go too far into. And then it also, because they went so hard in the paint about Middle Eastern politics, and then they're also like, oh, and La Raza, which is like this Mexican South American movement, is also trying to take over the US. So they kind of just try and take a little bit of everything from the whole buffet and present it. But those were the main ones. And one of the final was that maybe George Floyd was a dummy or had a clone. And then those are left very vague, but the insinuation is definitely made.
And then that's what I was gonna go off with, the dummy, where they're like the 7 Sigma Incorporated that makes these dummies is right across the street. That's like the only information that they have that like to stake on this claim. They're like, whoa, I'm just saying there's a thing across the street. You never know. Like that's part of the trouble in some of the claims in the film. Get to the hidden treasures. I don't know about you. I had a few hidden treasures in here. To me, I thought the score is top tier. I like the beats, but that's just me being biased because I'm a hip hop guy. You know what I mean? This guy's Patrick Mack is a musician. Before he started doing all this stuff, he was a musician, and it shows. And I like the beats. I like some of the transitions of the movie. I thought it was a thorough breakdown of the police footage of what you could get. A lot of it was redacted, obviously, and kind of you could tell that there was nefarious stuff going on. And I liked how they really connected a lot of people. Like it was like cool to like, oh, I can look into this, right? Like, oh, maybe this is something. Didn't give me any clarification, but it gives you a whole lot of lists. If you were like doing a podcast or something, you might have some good material to go off of.
I mean, I agree, but I also disagree on the music. I liked some of the music, but there were so many times that I actually had to make a note as I was watching this movie. Like, I like the music, but it does not go with whatever they were showing me on the screen. It would be like a city on fire, and then it's like a club beat or something, or I don't know, or there would be like a very somber moment, and then like this really aggressive beat, or vice versa. So the actual pairing, like the DJ work, could have used a little bit of help or more discretion, I think. And it's funny that you say that the guy that made this has like a music background, because it makes so much more sense now, because it really does make it easy that if you're into Pro Tools or you're using, one of the other sort of like digital audio workstation software, once you just add a video track to it, it's like the same tool all over again. So for a lot of people, video editing and audio editing becomes interchangeable, especially if you're into the engineering aspect. So I can see that, and it also gives you a leg up on being able to just put together a documentary. So the main pro for me, I think, was just that it does a great job of summarizing all of the different sound bites that you might have heard on like Fox News or AM radio or anything making the rounds on, like your racist aunt sharing something on Facebook, and you're like, oh yeah, I heard that George Floyd might have been a dummy. Well, here you've kind of got all of those different claims consolidated into one video, which is the main pro. And then I guess the main con for me is that that's all you get. You kind of just get a recap, a mixtape of the claims that Fox would insinuate, but there's not a lot of follow-up on this. And then it also adds a little bit of extra noise, because not only do you get the Fox News claims, now you're getting like the weird truth social claims and the weird like 4chan claims, like all across the internet. Those are also kind of summarized in here. But again, I want to stress that summarized does not mean that any conclusions are made, any additional context is really provided other than just collecting it all for you.
I would have to agree on that. And also, one of my overboard and just kind of doesn't do the film well. It's way longer than it should be. It drags a lot. Like you're trying to like, okay. And the thing is, it's not a long film. It's not like a Money Masters 3 hours. It's like an hour and 20 minutes. So you'd think like, oh, it should be boom, 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 but it just drags. And they kind of hop around on the scenes. Like they'll be talking about Santa Maria and this scene, and then it goes off, and you think that they're starting on a new thing, and then they bring her back into it, and it's just all over the place. And you made a good point. It's kind of like a 4chan form, just people arguing about, did you see this? Did you see this? Like that's kind of for me, and that it speculates way too much. There's way too much speculation. They make so many claims without evidence, especially with the human trafficking and drug trafficking, quote unquote. They kind of just throw it out there and then make no addition. They're like, well, secret societies do kidnap people and they do human trafficking, and La Raza does this, and Hamas does this. So possibly there could be human and you're like, okay, but where's the evidence of all the people that you brought up connected to it?
Right. So there's a couple different rhetorical rules, and if you have do like philosophical debate and stuff, but the two ones, and the reason I want to bring this one up is because they get criticized so much for mainstream media, and I guess this particular documentary, it felt like whether intentional or not, those same rhetorical devices or like tricks that are coming from mainstream media made their way into this video too and just kind of got repeated. For example, there's a lot of ad hominem where ad hominem, they'll mention like, well, here's this guy Keith Ellison, and Keith Ellison is connected politically to the lady that owns the club and to politics, and here's some domestic abuse allegations that were later dropped, and then they don't actually like say like what specifically about the abuse allegations that they decided to put VO and put an image and go into it for this documentary. At what point does that tie into George Floyd or Hamas or any of these other? It really is just sort of like selling everyone's character the same way that I was kind of excited in a way to hear about the human trafficking, like porn industry connection between Floyd and Chauvin, because I had heard this before online or internet or whatever. And finally, here's a video that's all about it. And they just kind of repeated the claim and didn't go directly into it. So it's a lot of like ad hominem stuff. This guy smoked weed. This guy was in porn. This guy, did, fentanyl. So therefore, if you're going to try and make a case that maybe he died from fentanyl and not from being suffocated, then make that case. And I've actually heard convincing versions of that case, and none of that was in here. So where it kind of needed those boosts, it didn't have it, and it leveraged ad hominem. And the other, I guess, the $1 million word for this one for me is there's a rhetorical device called Gish Gallop. And Gish Gallop is if you're in a debate, if you just pepper someone with like 200 claims, now they're going to have to spend the rest of their time not presenting their own thoughts and ideas or counters, but they're going to have to address every one of those 200 things. And it's a lot easier to make a claim and then just let it sit out on the table than making the claim and backing it up versus somebody that has to now like counter that thing, because now you got to be specific about what you're countering, what information you got to bring to the table. So that's known as a Gish Gallop rhetorical device, where you just flood with so many things that are shallow that you can't really come back and refute them all or even think about them all. It's like just bam, 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 bam. Here's another unrelated thing.
I think it's time to test the waters with a deep dive. For me, what holds up is, even though it's brief, they kind of finally make the connection. This is where the whole film stretches. I feel like they stretched this one to kind of fit into the Weatherman 1 and Weatherman 2. So at the end of the film, they kind of go, and here's the weather underground connection, because this guy knows this guy and this guy knows this guy. That was consistent because you can look it up. I looked a couple of those people do know each other. And I think the inconsistency in the official story, but it's kind of something we already knew, but that does hold up. And then I would say, obviously, the Minneapolis police force corruption, but that's also kind of like a hey, Captain Obvious for me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it is corrupt, probably.
Yeah, I was hoping that they were gonna be pulling some police reports, and we did a deep dive into this officer involved, and again, it didn't really go into the deep dives I needed from them for this to be like a super valuable documentary for me.
No, I totally agree. And what doesn't add up for me is a lot of the stuff, right? It's too many to even just really name. So I kind of just summed it up in like so much speculation. I think you said it the best, just pepper them to death with so much claims and suggestions that you can't debunk it because it will take you forever. So you just kind of move on. And a lot of stuff doesn't hold up in in these claims because we've now, I'll give them one credit is that they did it so fast. This came out about a month after the George Floyd incident. So they kind of like, you know, they lost a lot in the mix, right? In the sauce, they were trying to throw it together. They got like the Q vibes, and they try to throw everything that they talk about on their podcast in the previous two films and try to shove it all in here. And a lot of it doesn't hold up.
There's some very specific examples of that I got for like, so as they're going through this, they bring up the Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground, they bring up move.org. They mentioned that Omar Ilhan like married her brother at one point. They show clips from Project Veritas doing underground like secret interviews with people about using fetal cells and Planned Parenthood. Then they start showing Antifa books, and then they show like, look, this guy that's holding this Antifa book, there's a cafe connected to it called Moon Palace Books, and they're connected to this place called Geek Love. And now here's a picture of the FBI pedophile logo next to Roxy logo. And they're not stopping and saying, hey, here's why we're connecting the FBI pedophile logo to the Roxy logo. Here's a specific claim. Here's a person at Roxy, or here's, you know, them using their company assets to do this. It's just, here's a picture that you might have seen online. Okay, here's another one. Here's another one. Yeah. So, and the other the deep dive I was hoping they would go into is they bring up the Odd Fellows, and then they bring up like Lodge 118, and they zoom into an all-seeing eye graphic somewhere, and then they show a picture of the Odd Fellows dressed as women, making just, I guess, an insinuation that's also, I wasn't understanding, how did this kill George Floyd? Did these dudes dressing up in the 40s somehow like kill George Floyd? I was waiting for that specific connection. And then there was kind of a mic drop moment where they were like, who knows if they're really connected to the Odd Fellows? We don't really know. Or any other Masonic organization. And I just got to point, like, Odd Fellows is not a Masonic organization. It's a non-Masonic organization for people that don't want to join the Masons, but want to have the same kind of vibe and then get drunk and dress up like chicks, right? That's what they go to the Odd Fellows for.
Yeah, they really did push a lot of narratives. That's where you're talking about the Odd Fellows. And then for me, the hardest part was just getting through the, like, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking that we're gonna get, oh man, this cop had 20 other cops that were slinging dope for him, and they found like 15 houses with a bunch of kids in the basements or something of that nature, and they never give you anything. The payoff is really, it sucks. You know what I mean? The historical culture, like any impact it had on what we do, I think it was very minimal. I think that it's something that was just there. It's something that I think that I was like, I saw it, and I don't know how many other people saw it. I think it was like when I looked up on altcensor.com, where you can find all of In Pursuit's work. They had, I think, about like 200,000 views total, maybe 300,000. A nice view count, but mainly it seems like a Q phenomenon. So it was very niche. You know, it's stuck in this little group of people that believe a certain thing. And now this film may have pushed more into that Q narrative and been significant and an impact for them. But other than that, I don't think it really held weight for much people. And it was gone. And that's why it's also hard to find.
I agree on all counts of that. I think that it's a good example that it's so hard to find is almost proof that it hadn't made the hugest ripples and waves. And and the impact that it might have made or any legacy that might have left is going to be largely emotional, I think, and rhetorical, and not necessarily somebody 5 or 10 years from now quoting this movie because it broke some brand new information that led to some other discovery, because it doesn't do any of that.
So let's get into sink or swim. I'm gonna let you go first because I kind of changed mine up, but I think we're kind of bordering on the same level on this one as well.
I would rate this one shallow out of 3. We got shallow, deep dive, or 20,000 leagues. If we were to simplify it and just say sink or swim, then I would just have to say sink. Like, this one sinks because it just repeats all of the things that I've already heard, and it doesn't go into any more detail. And if we've got a rating for sink or swim, or to keep something shallow, then I think this sets a pretty good baseline. Like, this does not meet, I guess, my criteria for something I would recommend someone else go and watch. If I recommended someone else go and watch this, I would be embarrassed because they would come at me about like, hey, this made all these claims. And I'd have to be like, yeah, I guess, yeah, I know. It doesn't really back any of that up. So this one is kind of in shallow waters with me.
And I'm with you. I think it sinks, but I changed my rating because I was kind of like, because I think they dive deep on a lot of subjects, but I put it like a 0.5, a shallow dive, because it really like makes you think you're gonna go into something incredible, but boom, your neck cracks at the bottom of the ocean because you're only in 2 feet of water. And this one does not hold up at all. I'm the one that watched it first because I saw it in 2020, and I think at the time, watching so many other things, and I think I blended some other documentaries that we're actually going to get into this one because I watched them all around the same time, and rewatching it I was like, oh wow, this really sucks. Like, this stinks. Like, it doesn't have anything that I can go off of. I can go look up these connections, which you already know, but they're not significant enough to make any more material. It's just got like a 0.5, and I'm with you. Like, if we have anything, this is a sink completely, abandoned ship. All right, I think that does it for us. You know what I mean? Tune in under the docks. Got a good one coming up for you next. The Trayvon Martin hoax. I think that'll get some people really happy with us.
Yeah, and speaking of being happy with us, go ahead and go to our websites. You can go to paranoidamerican.com, go to the Patreon. You'll get early access to this, maybe other uncut versions. Who knows? You'll have to join in order to find out. And I know you got some spots you can send people to as well.
Yeah, killthemockingbirds.com. And I was actually going to get I'll talk to you afterwards. Maybe we'll get some links up. I was going to say that on both of our sites where they could get some of these documentaries to watch for themselves. All right, y'all. Peace.